Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. And if you're new to my channel, I have these live streams regularly where we have more in-depth talk and analysis, and we open the space up for the community for participation. I also have a video section with shorter updates. So if you prefer shorter videos, you can go ahead to my video tab and check out the latest updates there. So I posted a video earlier on, and I wanted to elaborate on that further in this video. The Israeli Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, he made some statements in relation to what's happening in the West Bank. So he said a couple of things that we need to deal, according to him, with the threat, exactly how we deal with the infrastructure in Gaza, including temporary evacuation of Palestinian civilians and any other step needed. Israel's senior diplomat tweeted, calling the operation a war in every sense. And Katz is not the first person to be speaking about this. We've had Smotrich and others talking about the genocide in the West Bank coming. Israel, from a very long time ago, they had plans to get rid of the population, depopulate the West Bank from Palestinians, like their attempts in Gaza. As a matter of fact, with their attempts to ethnically cleanse the population in Gaza, in the beginning, people immediately started talking about the West Bank because they know they have a similar plan to ethnically cleanse the population. Israel, ever since the Oslo Accords with the Palestinian Authority that were supposed to lead to a Palestinian state in the 1967 borders, they have constantly expanded in the West Bank. They had less than 100,000 settlers. Now you're talking about almost 1 million. They always steal more Palestinian land. They expel Palestinians from their homes, and they use their squatters, their squatting establishment in the West Bank to terrorize the Palestinian people and make life as miserable as possible for them. With regards to what's happening in the West Bank, Israel is carrying out intensive operations in the areas of Tubas, Jenin, and Tul Karim. They are conducting operations in hubs where they faced resistance. So you might have also heard about Nur Shams camp, that's next to Tul Karim. So you're talking about an intensity when it comes to the resistance in the West Bank, intensity that surprised many people. There are many reasons for the resistance in the West Bank. Firstly, a show of solidarity with what's happening in Gaza. Secondly, these people are still suffering from 1948 to this day, and especially after Israel occupied the West Bank in 1967, and they face constant misery and oppression from the Israeli forces. You're talking about areas that have been split in half, families that used to live together. Israel built a wall between them, checkpoints left, right, and center, administrative detention everywhere, shoot to kill for fun, as confirmed by many people who were in the army who broke the silence and served in the West Bank, deliberately scaring the Palestinians, forcing them to not move and close their shops, for example, in many places in the West Bank, alongside a list of daily abuses from Israel in the West Bank. However, during Al-Aqsa flood, after the 7th of October, we have seen increased resistance actions against Israel that signaled to a potential collaboration or a potential support from certain figures in the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. As a matter of fact, there were confirmed cases of people who are from the armed forces of the Palestinian Authority who participated with the resistance in the West Bank. Why did these people collaborate with the resistance when they are supposed to fight them in accordance to their agreements with Israel? Well, it's because they are families at the end of the day, and in many cases they come from the same place. You might see someone working with the Palestinian Authority, and his brother or someone, some of his relatives, are fighting Israel. So, and they are seeing what Israel is doing when it comes to the constant oppression and constant killings in the West Bank. We've had over 600 people being killed in the West Bank, most of whom unnecessarily. So you're not talking about people who are fighting Israel in the West Bank. In many cases, Israel, they blocked certain locations and they started preventing Palestinians from going there, and they shoot to kill. Over 600 people, 117 of which at least are children. And we've seen many videos coming up from the West Bank showing that Israel is targeting these people for no reason and enabling the squatting establishment and carrying out these pogroms against the Palestinians in the West Bank, going into villages, wreaking havoc and terror, and burning crops, burning houses, burning cars, enabled by the state, no matter what they want to tell you. No matter what Israel wants to say, they are enabled by the IDF and constantly do this as a policy, as an ongoing policy to make life as miserable as possible for these people and try and expel them. Of course, during that time, we saw statements coming out from Israel. Firstly, these statements came from multiple groups. There were certain elements in the establishment or in the controlling government or cabinet in Israel that did not want an escalation with the West Bank. One of these people was Yoav Gallant, not because he loves Palestinians, no, because of a strategic preference. Why? Because to him, we need to get Gaza out of the way first before we do anything, and we don't want to exhaust our resources in the West Bank. Our priority is to deal with Hamas. Prime Minister Netanyahu said we want to demolish the Hamas. Well, we haven't demolished 10% of Hamas. In many reports, they still have the same forces when it comes to numbers. They are still fighting Israel. They're still targeting them with strategic missiles. What are you doing in the West Bank? So that was the argument. And you're already facing shortage, and you already need equipment, and the list goes on. So not out of love, of course, for the Palestinian people or out of compassion or empathy. No, God forbid. It's because to them, it is not a strategic priority. So they wanted to reduce the activity in the West Bank to a minimum, do the necessary stuff, and continue the genocide in Gaza up until they deal with it. But that wasn't something that everyone agreed on in the Israeli government. And of course, the voices would be from the extreme religious Zionists that form the biggest and apply the most pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. We had Bezalel Smotrich saying that we need to do to Tul Karam what we did to Gaza. And then again, another threat to Jenin, and it's leading us to this operation. Israel is calling it the biggest operation since 2002 in the West Bank. And we already had certain actions in the West Bank in recent months that weren't seen for the past 2 decades in the West Bank. So you're talking about a serious escalation. However, this military campaign is a further escalation, and they are calling it a war. So it's viewed as part of the ongoing war. They are invading, they are destroying roads, they are threatening to expel the population, and they are besieging hospitals, which is leading to devastation when it comes to certain patients, checking who goes in and out. And they are threatening with increased escalation. So far, they're saying the operation is going to take us at least several days. Usually, when it comes to Israel, it always starts with several days, but it hasn't stopped in the West Bank. It never really did stop the resistance, no matter how much they collaborated with the West Bank Authority, no matter how much they tried to persuade people not to fight. It doesn't matter, because all of the reasons are still there. And this is where Israel constantly fails. The reasons for people resisting them are still there. What are they? Occupation, oppression, killing, and looting people and expelling them from their homes. The Palestinian people, primarily in the West Bank and Gaza, they want to be left alone. And that's something the Israelis haven't done. Even when Israel fled from Gaza, was forced out of Gaza, following blows of the resistance, they did not leave them alone. They implemented a blockade, and they started to enforce conditions, and they banned them from having an airport, and they banned them from having a port where they can get aid through ships or what have you. And they were constantly choked. That led to the Palestinians, of course, developing a very intensive network of tunnels. Why? Because of the need to survive. Because of the need to survive. So Israel constantly ignores all of these key elements when it comes to the oppression and historical suffering of the Palestinian people, and always view it from a security perspective. But it's not just that. You're talking about people in the Israeli government who have a vision for a greater Israel. Bezalel Smotrich is a man who was posting maps of the greater Israel. One of the cabinet members in Netanyahu's government was calling for an occupation of Sinai and new settlements in Sinai. And they haven't made it a secret when it comes to expelling the Palestinians from Gaza, of course. Neither the West Bank, neither the Palestinian citizens in their land, in historical Palestine or modern day Israel. They want to get rid of all of them. Why is that? Because they're slowly losing. Well, they have lost already, and now they're losing even more with what they're doing. You see, the irony is Israel's trying to implement an ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians, and they're simultaneously ethnically cleansing the Israelis because of the millions of Israelis fleeing Israel, Jewish Israelis leaving Israel because of the situation. And the Palestinians are still sticking to their lands because they're the indigenous people. They are the indigenous people with the history. They are not a bunch of squatters coming and occupying and creating a pseudo narrative to justify their existence and their control by force over that land. What are we looking from this Israeli military campaign that's happening in the West Bank? Well, firstly, they made their intentions clear, didn't they? They said a couple of times, we want to turn Tulkarm into Gaza. We want to turn Jenin into Gaza. So let's let no one be surprised if they start carrying out massive airstrikes and killing massive numbers of people in the West Bank, like they're doing in Gaza. So that no one gets surprised when Israel starts to do that. So number one, they have their intentions clear. Secondly, they're calling it a military operation. A military operation that has airstrikes, that's killing 10 people at a time sometimes, ground invasions, special forces, including large units of what they label as musta'ribun, or those who make themselves appear as Arabs, or musta'rivim in Hebrew. They have very large networks of them in the West Bank. Well, not always, but based in the West Bank, but they are groups of people who act and behave like Arabs and carry out certain assassination operations or kidnappings in the West. In the West Bank, they've done it many times in hospitals previously. And as a matter of fact, now their excuse to besieging these hospitals are that they want to target these people who fight them. Well, why are you targeting the sewers? Why are you targeting all of the infrastructure? And why are you restricting people from movement? It's not just the people who are fighting. They always use that as an excuse to push for a further, bigger agenda. One may ask, okay, if your campaign in Gaza failed, why failed? Why do we say failed? Well, because some people don't like to say, they don't like it when we say Israel has been defeated in Gaza. No, Israel has been defeated غصباً عن أبوك وأمك, as we say in Arabic. But Israel failed, to say the least. Failed why? What were their declared objectives in Gaza? Their declared objectives were demolishing the Hamas, ensuring that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel, and returning the Israelis from Gaza. Have they achieved any of that? No, they haven't. They haven't achieved any of that. So you might wonder then, they haven't reached a ceasefire, no deal, no nothing. Why are they expanding to the West Bank? Well, because you're talking about the same government. You're talking about the same government that made all of these strategic mistakes carrying on in the West Bank. We're only seeing an escalation after escalation. Netanyahu came in, he started this barbaric genocide with his government, He continued to go on targeted assassinations in Beirut, in Tehran, attacks in Syria, attacks in Lebanon, attacks in Yemen, all across the region. And in many cases, by the way, these attacks have been carried out before any 7th of October. Like Israel targets Syria on a regular basis. They invade Lebanese airspace on a regular basis. They carry out assassinations globally on a regular basis. Why? Because they feel like they believe they are the entitled nation. Everyone else is a goy, is a servant to them, subhuman. They are the ultimate race, and they are entitled to do whatever they want to do. This is how they view the region. This is how they view the people around them. So you're talking about the same mentality expanding in the West Bank, thinking that by committing these crimes against the civilian population, it would somewhat lead the people to turn their backs on the people resisting Israel, for example. Like, what are you doing? You're bringing chaos on us. You're causing us a lot of trouble. Or somewhat reach a solution with them. However, that's not realistic again, because you're talking about hubs that have been there for all of the time, plus the Palestinian armed resistance in the West Bank gained all of this support, and they've conducted such large-scale operations that really not many people expected under the eyes of Israel. Because Israel is in the West Bank, in every area of the West Bank, even in areas that are supposed to be under complete Palestinian Authority control. All of them are Israel. Israel is present there. They can conduct operations. They have networks of agents, and they have a cooperating Palestinian Authority. So all of that happened under the eyes and under the control of Israel. It wasn't like Gaza, where at least Israel was out. Well, they could have had some sort of surveillance or some people working for them or what have you. However, Hamas did a pretty good job in cleaning Gaza. But you weren't surprised from like Hamas's capabilities, because, well, Israel is not there. They have tunnels, they have production, they get technology, they manage somehow to, but the West Bank, how are you able to conduct such operations and get such weapons and do all of these things with Israel present all across the area? It's because, firstly, Israel failed. Secondly, there's a will. There's a will because there's a problem. And Israel hasn't dealt with that problem. And by the looks of it, never will up until its complete demise. Why? Because they are conducting what they're conducting now. So what they're doing, in effect, is giving everyone every reason under the sun to remove any legitimacy of the state and legitimize any action being taken against Israel. They have and are committing a genocide and an infanticide in Gaza and mass destruction, barbaric war crimes. The biggest war crimes of the 21st century are happening in Gaza. It is one of the biggest mass murder of children and infanticide. More than all of the global armed conflicts in the past 4 years, Israel is killing that many children and more. They've landed over 80,000 tons of bombs in Gaza, the equivalent of over 5 times what the US landed in Hiroshima, nuclear. And they are they are acting recklessly. They target figures outside of their territories. And they are continuing to expand and behave more recklessly and make themselves appear in a far worse manner. Like anyone who would have thought by now that, okay, there is a possibility to reach an agreement with them. Look, maybe there can be a ceasefire. None of that is happening. These people constantly find areas to escalate in. Hamas accepted a ceasefire, they rejected. They were close to reach a ceasefire, they assassinated Hani and Tahran. Before that, they assassinated the top military figure in Lebanon, one of the top figures in the armed wing of Hezbollah. Of course, targeting the Iranian IRGC figures in Syria before that led to Iran retaliating and putting themselves in such a weak position. They are behaving like a psychopath, like a racist psychopath, arrogant racist psychopath, who just lost any sort of reasoning, lost any ounce of reasoning, behaving recklessly, expanding constantly. And the main reason is why are they behaving in that manner? It's because they are enabled. They are enabled, supported 100% by the United States government and by other Western governments who still support Israel to this day. If it wasn't to the United States enablement and full support, Israel wouldn't have carried out what it's doing now. All the talk of the US administration of them applying pressure on Israel to concede, to try and reach a ceasefire, European countries sending their foreign ministers to Israel, all of that means nothing so long as Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel are getting what they want. And what do they want? Money and arms. They are careless about the Israeli people. They are careless about the Israeli economy. They are careless about anything but continuing down this insane, psychopathic, murderous path of expanding this war and pushing the region further into at least, instability. That's the minimum, let alone an all-out war. Because they're doing all of that when they are awaiting, firstly, a potential second response from Hezbollah, or phase 2 of their response, a response that hasn't come yet from Yemen, and a response that we're waiting on from Iran. All of their proposals for the Egyptian side, when it comes to the mediation and the negotiations, nothing worked. Egypt told them time after time that it's not acceptable. You need to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor. Hamas are not there even. Hamas told them, bring us a deal on the table, one that we agreed on, show us an implementation path instead of having this theater. And Hamas also said that the United States is complicit with Israel. And again, this is the absurd thing about these negotiations. You have two sides negotiating who are one. What do you mean the United States? The United States is not a mediator. The United States is a complicit criminal that's worse than Israel. America, the American government, the United States administration, the United States government is worse than Israel. How can they remain a mediator? What are we doing? And why isn't there more pressure to take them completely out of the picture, have someone else in, and try and actually impose something on Benjamin Netanyahu? That's not the case. And if they actually wanted a solution, they would have applied genuine steps to make sure that Netanyahu doesn't go there. You already know that he's careless about you, Biden. You already know that he has no respect for the president of the United States. You already know he has no respect for the institutions. He goes there in front of the Congress despite disapproval from the president. The president swore at him multiple times over the phone, started shouting. All of that means nothing. All of that means nothing because they are enabling them. What we're expecting in the West Bank is a potential escalation that could lead to far, far bigger catastrophes. The situation is very dangerous, and you're talking about the same forces that just committed the genocide in Gaza, as in the same people. So they're withdrawing some of the people who served in Gaza, deploying them in the West Bank. These are the same people who carried out the massacre. It's not like it's a different even part of the army. In many cases, some of the brigades in the West Bank are worse. But you're talking about the same people who implemented the genocide in Gaza going to the West Bank. And if they're not stopped, if no genuine pressure is applied on them primarily from the United States administration, you can see far bigger tragedies. To a large extent, it will also depend on the level of resistance that they get, the level of armed resistance that they face in the West Bank. But that's why it won't be solved, because you're talking about cells in the West Bank that can hide and they can hide for a very long time. Israel, for example, can be there, can have presence. They won't do any actions against them, giving Israel the idea or the false confidence that, okay, we'll resolve them, and then they'll come back again. These people fighting them are smart. They won't necessarily expose themselves, although they have a supporting front. They have a supporting front, but that's not necessarily going to solve the problem. Because if Israel wants to get rid of, well, how can you make sure that you got rid of all of them? Secondly, how did that happen under your eyes and monitoring all of this time? No questions, even at a security level. They don't even ask themselves anything. How did it come to such a level? Why are they attacking me? Why am I even there? It's occupied territory. What am I doing there? Because you hear about most of the actions happening in Jenin and in these places, Tubas, Tul Karim. Why are they there? It's occupied territory. Get out of there. So the days coming look like they are going to be intense. They just started this campaign in the current definition of a war, an active war in the West Bank. We've seen dozens of people getting killed, at least 10 in a couple of strikes when it comes to Jenin and in the other refugee camps. And again, if no one stops them, then we can see a further escalation in the West Bank that will lead to something potentially far bigger. And this is what I wanted to share with you. Welcome everyone again to the live stream. Let me open the space up for all of you. And thank you for everyone who participated and sent any message. Rebecca Spiegel, ZUK, thank you so much. And Studio for your supers. ZUK saying Gaza was a decoy for taking the West Bank. 10,000 young men imprisoned means 10,000 less resistance in the West Bank before this new attack on the West Bank. Yes, but don't forget that the 10,000 doesn't mean you had people fighting there. Israel constantly implements administrative detention in the West Bank. Administrative detention means they can imprison everyone by kidnapping them, and they don't allow them any legal access. Their families won't know their whereabouts, and they can spend months without knowing anything. And Israel can do that for 6 months, and then they can renew this administrative detention, basically illegal kidnapping. And in many cases, they kidnap people without any substantial evidence. This is why they do it, because they wouldn't necessarily have something solid against them, but they will just kidnap them. So, and yes, we had an additional 10,000 prisoners. So the numbers of Palestinian prisoners was less than 10,000. It was 6,500 at one point. Now we're talking about over 20,000. And it's escalating further. But again, that doesn't mean all of them were fighters, those who were imprisoned. And let me go to your next one. Studio Rainer as well, thank you. Let me just see if I can highlight your supers here quickly. So we had many comments. Studio Rainer, thank you. You said Israel is weaponizing the G crime media for mass subversion. Do you think Israel subverted the US government? It's the only rationale behind this insanity. Demoralize your enemy. Well, subversion, pressure, blackmailing, right? The subversion of not only the United States, but so many other European countries. Almost all Western countries that support Israel lost sovereignty to an extent to this cult that isn't only restricted with Zionism, but Zionism is there. Zionism is there. That's why they constantly try and criminalize any criticism use dystopian policing methods like in Germany and other countries to try to criminalize anti-Zionism, like was the case with the previous British government here a couple of months ago. All of these things tell you that these people have a strong lobby, a blackmailing network, and mass subversion. And thank you, Studio, for your super. Let's see. James Drapkin, I'm sorry, Mahmoud, did you say that Israel and the Palestinian Authority are working together? Israel and the Palestinian Authority of the West Bank, they work together because they have agreements from 1993. They have something called the Oslo Accords, and that includes collaboration, including security collaboration. So of course they work together, and their security collaboration is very strong. And that's why constantly when you hear about certain statements coming out from the Authority of the West Bank, you don't see it in line with the Palestinian people. You don't see it representing the will of the Palestinian people. So, and that's something that's been happening for a very long time. They have been criticized heavily for it, especially seeing as this diplomatic path, or what's called as a peace process, hasn't worked for 30 years. You know, some people don't know that simultaneously with the armed resistance on one hand, you have a peace process on the other hand. Now, one might wonder, well, what if the peace process succeeded? Would the armed resistance have the same level of legitimacy and support? Probably not. Why? Because the Palestinian Authority and Israel would show you that, well, peace process works. Why? Because there's no need for violence. And look, here you go. 31 years down the line, nothing but further expansion of the squatting establishment in the West Bank, more murder, more administrative detention, more checkpoints, more brutality. That's what you get. And to this day, unfortunately, until this day, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank is keen on the same path they've taken before, although it's a path that did not work. That did not work. You're talking about a side that does not recognize you. They don't recognize your existence as people. They don't recognize you. So how can you reach any sort of agreement with someone who does not recognize you? You reach an agreement with someone by having, face to face, same level, not as the doormat, right? And they're stepping on you and ordering you to. It doesn't work like that. Excessive force, will they fight in the West Bank as hard as Hamas? Not to the same level. They are more limited in capabilities. They are more limited with logistics. They are more limited in the surrounding network and infrastructure, everything. But saying that with all of this, they have managed to do something that caused Israel a headache. And Daniela, thank you so much for this. Much appreciated. James Thompson, Mahmoud, could this now give the resistance ample cause to intervene in line with the UN backing to stop the genocidal regime? Well, everyone has a reason to intervene in line with not only the UN backing to stop the genocidal regime, with the UN resolutions supporting the right of the Palestinian people of a state of right of return, right of armed resistance, everything. And with many other declarations. I think this will not necessarily change the timing of the response of either potentially a second phase response from Hezbollah or a first phase or an all-out first response from Ansarullah in Yemen or response from Iran. As a matter of fact, this could play to their favor in delaying it slightly further, because Israel is exhausting even more of its resources now in the West Bank. So the way everyone outside is viewing it, that's why I always say these people are not led with a guided strategic view of anything. The people leading Israel, you're failing in a front, you have no closure in that front. It's still a very big threat to that front, alongside so many other fronts. And I was speaking about Gaza, and you go and open another one with an actual military campaign, not like limited, targeted campaigns here and there. So Iran is looking, okay, cool. Well, exhaust yourself further, put yourself in a weaker position, so that if we do attack you at any point or any of the other resistance, you'll be in a potentially weaker position. They are not taking any decision, any move to de-escalate, to genuinely try and reach some sort of an understanding. They're unable to reach a ceasefire, for heaven's sake. And not only that they're unable to reach a ceasefire, they're constantly just escalating further. And Studio, thanks again for your contribution and input. Kate, Hezbollah said that they will never allow Hamas to be defeated in Palestine. Israel started. Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, Iraqis will finish it. Yeah, I mean, well, with the recent escalation, I mean, when you only talk about the escalation, not the fact that you have Israel and the historical oppression of everything. Hamas, of course, started the operation on the 7th of October. They had many reasons to start that operation, and they were well within their right to carry out any act of resistance against an illegal occupier. However, Israel did not respond in a manner that was necessarily in the best interest of Israelis. And that has been evident. That has been evident because they killed a third of their prisoners in Gaza. They led to millions of Israelis fleeing Israel. They led to people completely no longer believing in Zionism or in the state of Israel and the concept of having a Jewish state, at least in this interpretation and this manner. So what else do they have? What do they have to stand on exactly? Power. That's what's left for Israel. Firepower, terror, mass terror, state-sponsored terrorism, complete annihilation, destruction, and thinking you can achieve your objective by causing as much destruction and barbarism against your enemy. That's the only thing they're relying on. Because the people who are still in Israel, firstly, they're split. Not all of them are with the government, of course. At least half of them are not with the government. You have tens of thousands protesting regularly. Protests reach up to 100,000 every single day, including the people who are mostly concerned about the Israelis kidnapped in Gaza. Who are they? The families of the Israelis who were kidnapped, and people who were released from Gaza. People who were released from Gaza. So, and imagine that for a second. Someone who was released during either a ceasefire agreement or in an operation. I mean, the ones alive in an operation, you're talking about 8, and the cost was, in most of them, massacres against the Palestinian people and the killing of some Israelis. But it's so symbolic that they are protesting against the government that released them, one way or another. That's extremely symbolic. So who else are they winning? They are relying on Uncle Sam to provide them with the weapons and with the billions and continue supporting them. And Dr. X, thank you so much. Love you, brother. Much love back. Thank you. If Bibi's worst fear is to be imprisoned, what about his bunker? Not to mention the trash can history has in store for him. He is not just fearing imprisonment. He does not want to lose grip of power. Benjamin Netanyahu's mentality, he sees himself as Israel's savior, as Israel's more than Ben Gurion. He probably sees himself as more than Herzl, Benjamin Netanyahu. He wants to go down in history as the king of kings of Israel, who did not give up, who did not give in to international pressure, including from the United States with all of its power. And he achieved his objective initially. He has this mentality. Why? Because this mentality of his gave him successes previously. How? So he previously went against the will of some of his, in many cases, by the way, in many cases in the past 2 decades, members of coalition in the government. And he had to take down governments. And then when he went to another election and he won, and he managed to come up with this new coalition. Everything. He'll sell his ideals. He will make deals with the devil and everything. He did that over 6 times. He knows how to talk himself out of problems. Benjamin Netanyahu has good sales skills. He saw himself repeatedly getting himself out of trouble to a level where he thought, I can get myself out of any trouble. And that's where it becomes dangerous for him, primarily. You're not talking about an election campaign. You're not talking about losing one member of your coalition and forming another coalition. You're talking about an existential threat to the existence of your state. And it's not just him saying that, it's other people saying that. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure if he actually said that. But many other people, senior figures in Israel, said that. But he's still led and driven by his previous successes, his political successes. He's on a power trip. The fact that he has so much control and power in America, the fact that he is backed by lots of money, lots of corporate and financial figures, all of these things give him more boost and confidence that he is able to somehow get himself out of it. So he's completely blind to many facts on the ground, and his will to go down as Israel's greatest leader is taking down the country with him. It's taking the country down with him, this idea of his, and he's not realizing the level of damage that he is causing to the state of Israel. Philip, I think the IOF pushed on the West Bank is to provoke Iran to speed up Iran's plan. Could be. They could view it in that manner, but I'm not sure if they did, how successful that would be. Iran is very calculated. Iran proved time after time that it never carries out an operation without reading everything through. So that could be a reason, but I'm not sure if that's part of the reason, how successful they would be. I'm sure they just want to get the response out of the way, but I think Iran and the other movements are having fun seeing them in that manner and are in no rush to give them what they need and are in no rush to give them closure. Because like I said, if you look at the Hezbollah reaction, Israel was looking for closure and some certainty. The last thing it gave them is closure. It gave them even more uncertainty because they told them, yeah, it's, it's the first phase of the response, and no one else responded yet. And in Israel said, when is the second phase? Are the others going to do the same? And is that going to lead to a year of delay when they already just want to get it over and done with? Marvin, do you see Ukraine as becoming new Israel when Israel collapsed? A land for people just created, churches closed, denationalized by war. Tsar is buying up Ukraine on the cheap. Well, if they still believe in the idea of having a nation state, there is a Jewish state in Oblast. Go to Oblast if you really want like a Jewish state. See, that's the thing. The people who are selling you all of this notion of a Jewish state in Israel, it's all a facade, it's all a front. It's a neo-colonialist project using Judaism as a front. Because if they want a Jewish state, right, you can have a state anywhere. But I don't think necessarily, I mean, many people would probably, because many of them are Ukrainians or of Ukrainian origin, many people in Israel. But not necessarily. I think the Israelis who would go out of Israel would look at the most convenient place for them, probably least risky place. If they are tied with the government or with the genocide, they will probably try and, I don't know, change their names or something, get new identities. So not necessarily one place. And from the information we have Israelis all over the place. We have Israelis in Europe, in multiple parts of the United States, in Asia, in Africa, in several places. Marvin is saying, where will Israel expel West Bankers to? Jordan? Will Jordan take more refugees? Well, if they want, that would be the first place. That's why in the beginning, when they were talking about expelling the population of Gaza, talk started to rise. They started talking more about expelling the population in the West Bank. As a matter of fact, the Egyptian and Jordanian government at the time started to warn from this, to a level where the Jordanian foreign minister said if Israel expels or tries to expel the Palestinians of the West Bank to Jordan, that will be a declaration of war. The foreign minister of Jordan, Ayman al-Safadi, said that will be a declaration of war. And Egypt's president, he also said that they want to do this to Gaza. Of course, we won't allow it, but tomorrow they're going to do the same thing with the West Bank and get rid of the Palestinian cause. From that perspective, both Jordan and Egypt know what's happening, and Egypt played a great role that is underestimated by many in preventing the campaign of ethnic cleansing. If Egypt opened the borders and bowed down to Israel's pressure and the US pressure and the UK pressure and the France pressure and the German pressure to open the borders and allow all of the Palestinians into Sinai, you would have been in a different situation now. And that would have given Israel even more confidence to go and implement the same thing in Jordan. And when it comes to that prevented the ethnic cleansing. Israel so far is applying all of this genocide and controlling the Philadelphia crossing and all of that to keep it really tense in a hope that they could implement it by force. They want to show everyone that you didn't want to reach a deal. Look, we'll massacre most of them and implement it by force. This is what they want to do. Yet, with all of that, Egypt is not budging in. And they're telling them, no, get out of the Philadelphia corridor. Hamas says so, as a matter of fact. They told them, Hamas said, get rid of the Philadelphia corridor. We don't want you there. And there's no point in talking. And now, apparently, they have a new negotiating round in Doha. Ho, ho, ho. Ho, ho. Ho, ho, ho. Another negotiating round. For what? What are they doing? And to be fair, why is anyone still participating in this theater? Last round in Doha, a couple of elaborations next week. It's exactly as we said at the time when they said about told you they'll go to Cairo, and then they'll tell you we're going to have further clarifications in Qatar. Now they're having further clarifications in Qatar, talking to themselves. acting like there's something. I'm not. Why is the American administration doing this? By this is something. This is the question here. Are they trying to show the people, the voters, that we're trying to reach? What are they trying to do exactly? Of course, they're buying Israel time. But apart from buying Israel, why the act for the people? So they can show them, oh, look, we are having a peace. There's still some hope. There is no hope on this current formula. Radonkic, what's up, Mahmoud? Do you believe that Israel is getting more extreme and will soon attempt to build a temple in the noble sanctuary Al-Aqsa? Well, they said that. Well, Ben Gvir said that, and another previous MK said that we want to build a synagogue in Al-Aqsa. And it wouldn't be surprising. I mean, what's preventing them? They're killing masses of people. What's the problem with them bombing Al-Aqsa? And they can do that if they want. And Khadija, thank you so much for your input. Bill, I saw some Palestinians talking about they don't like watermelon images because people were executed for carrying a flag, so replacing it with a watermelon is disrespectful to the martyrs. Thought, people use what they can use. You know what I mean? Don't judge people for any emojis they want to use. And it's a symbol now, Why not? Why not? And Israel doesn't like it, by the way. Israel doesn't like it stopped having watermelons now. And John 11, have you heard of the jet crash in Syria? I've heard about attacks in Syria, but not about the jet crash in Syria, or an Israeli jet crash in Syria. Tehran, the local media on Wednesday reported that the crash of an unknown fighter jets in the outskirts of Deir ez-Zor, Syria. This unknown fighter jet crashed in an area of suburbs of Deir ez-Zor. But there is no confirmation. Interesting. Well, it's an area controlled by the Syrian army. So there's a likelihood that it's Israel. But we haven't heard a confirmation. We haven't seen a confirmation. Chocolate Pudding, thank you for that. You said, to be honest, they're losing credibility with the delayed and weak responses. 40 gain now going to the West and still barely anything. Well, listen, delayed and weak responses, that is up to the people who are doing these responses. They know their capabilities, they know their limitations, they know the repercussions, they know their inner situations, they know their economic situation, they know what they're capable of, they know how long their breath is, they know how long they can hold weapons, they know how long they can have a lifeline. Is not every country that's going to participate has the same capacity of US support for Israel, for example. Even if we want to talk about Russian support for Iran in case something breaks out, all-out war. Russia is engaged in a massive war, and they are using a lot of weapons, and they're buying weapons from Iran. That's not to say that they are, losing everything. No, that's why they're taking it bit by bit, Russia, because they know how to deal with it. They don't always go all out. Like in what was described as one of their biggest attacks, or the biggest attack yesterday or the day before, where they used some of their new strategic missiles that they introduced in 2018, Kinjal missiles, some of them. They launched just over 200 missiles and drones. So they are very careful. Likewise with the other fronts too. So they have their calculations. And of course, there's urgency to end it. There's urgency for everything. And the fact of the matter is, no one stopped the genocide of the Palestinian people. not the Palestinians, not the Palestinian resistance, not Egypt, not Hezbollah. No one stopped the genocide. But what people did is apply measures and participate in a manner that would not make it worse. And that on its own is a work that is appreciated. For example, Egypt prevented the ethnic cleansing. That's very important. Hezbollah exhausted 50% of the armed forces of Israel. Very important. Yemen, they destroyed Israel's economy with their embargo. Very important. And the Iraqi resistance that they're targeting, and of course Iran with their new equation and the impact that they had with this unprecedented attack on Israel. You need to be realistic about what we expect here, because like I said again, no one stopped the genocide. That's the reality. That's the harsh reality. Yeah, we need to be in a different reality, of course. We're not there yet, though. But there are people who prevented a far bigger catastrophe. If we saw no fronts, for example, participating, well, all of these resources could be landing in Gaza. And Israel wouldn't pay too much attention to other places too. They wouldn't necessarily have the same problem that they have militarily. It would still exhaust them to hell, but it wouldn't be the same thing. Matlas X, thank you for that. You said, I heard a statistic a few days ago where the United States sent over 500 shipments of weapons since October 7th. That's more than one per day. Yeah. Yes, it is. They constantly send shipments. And, the United States is saying that it's for Israel to defend itself. And if they send them, the same weapons that they killed tens of thousands of Palestinians with, they'll tell you, oh, we hope you don't use them. Imagine the logic behind that. Studio Rainer, thank you again for your super. He said, do you think Qatar separated from the other Gulf state out of genuine desire to help Palestine? I don't know much about Qatar too, but other Gulf states, they seemed to believe in peace. Well, listen, I think the Qatari government has a very high level of representation for the Qatari people. I talk about a tiny country. I think the civilian population is approximately 330,000 or something. And the rest of them are foreigners. So you're talking about a tiny state, okay? But the Qatari people, okay, no, 2.6 million. Who was the... Okay, hold on a second. Let me see how many of them are actual Qataris. No, 2.6. Okay, 2.9. Almost 3 million. All right. That was the UAE. Was it 300,000 maybe? Okay, and the rest of them foreigner. Okay, 3 million. Tiny place, of course, rich. The government, they have a representation of the people. They are usually in good relation, and they genuinely have this position. But at the same time, they have relations with Western countries. They have relations with the US. They have massive investments, and they have business deals with Israel. Their relations with them seemed was up and down with Israel, of course, but they are the kind of the link between trying to have a solution but they're not having a full diplomatic relation with them. Now, that's a genuine difference. Qatar tried to have this relationship that almost no other country, I mean, Morocco to an extent maybe, but not to the same level as Qatar had with Israel. Right? So they genuinely support, they genuinely want peace. Of course, they're very limited in terms of participation, like physical participation, but in terms of support, funding, charitable stuff, Qatar does a lot, and they did to the Palestinian resistance through their media what no other organization has done. There's an argument, of course, on the other hand, they brought the Israeli side, and that's true. But they have shown the whole world the resistance of the Palestinian people. They do not use the same terminology as other countries do, for example. And they genuinely want to reach a solution. And again, Israel is frustrated with them. Israel hoped that Qatar would apply more pressure on the Palestinian side to submit to the demands of Israel. So they are upset. And Qatar continued down the same path, which is a very important and good path in supporting the Palestinian people. Kirk, thank you so much, brother. You said, please take care of yourself, brother. I feel like you'll be very busy in the coming months. I'm busy anyway. Brother, thank you so much for that. Kirk, thank you so much. But yeah, we're always busy lately. James, Mahmoud, do you think that the USA supports Israel so firmly because Israel enforces its interests in the region within maybe take out the targets that the US wants but can't act directly? That's an interesting comment. That's an interesting observation. The US and Israel are one. The United States and Israel are one now. Israel was established by the previous British Empire with the Balfour Declaration, with the Zionist movement and rich families who believed in the idea and supported it. Up until the collapse of the British Empire and the rise of the US Empire, US took the role of supporting Israel. And Israel is acting based on the interests of the elite. So when we talk about American interests, and it's very important to always elaborate that, otherwise people would confuse it. American interest to who? Which American interest? To your average person working 9 to 5? To poor people? To people barely making ends meet? To homeless people? To people who don't have health care? To who? To which America? So that's it. To the elite in America, to the big bucks, to the big money, right? It's not like it's Israel is benefiting the average American person. What the hell do I do with them? They're actually tarnishing the image of the United States. People hate the US because of their support for Israel, and they don't want anything to do with them. And there are increasing voices about this lobby roaming in the United States like cancer and dictating its foreign policy, dictating policy. But the comment about enforcing the interests where they don't reach, that's interesting because they did use them as that before. To this day, some of them in the United States administration view it that way. When the United States wanted to always be on Iran's case when they invaded Iraq, they were always warning Iran through Israel. So there was a period of several years in Israel where you constantly heard about Iran. Then all of a sudden they stopped talking about them every day. What happened? Did the threat disappear? Did Iran change its views? Did something drastic happen? None of that happened. Why? But the US clearly had some sort of an understanding. So yes, that explains their support. But I think Israel, the funny thing is, it looks like Israel is contributing to the inevitable collapse of the US empire. It's accelerating it by its actions. Americans were already criticizing the unconditional, almost, well, conditional to an extent now. The conditions are going away now, right? Support of Zelensky against Russia, saying, why are we spending so much money over there? And now they're looking at a child murdering, a depraved entity committing a genocide and acts of barbarism against innocent civilians. And they're saying, why am I part of this? Well, why are we part of this? Why are we supporting them with taxpayers' money? So, for anyone viewing Israel as such in the US administration, I don't think they've looked far enough. And I honestly think that there are people in the United States establishment, especially in the deeper establishment in the United States, not just the figures that you see on television, who prepare for the day after Israel. They are trying to keep it as much as possible to have damage control because this is what they're used to. They don't really want a functioning, thriving state in Palestine, but they envision the day after Israel. And they're probably planning for the day after Israel. And what they're planning for is not good. So it will be something that is chaotic, something that will continue the problems. And that's something that is worth talking about further. The US, they have plans for the day after Israel, but that day is going to be chaotic to them. Well, because they want to continue the chaos. Why? Because they have an option to solve the problem tomorrow. Tomorrow you can solve the problem. Firstly, stop the support. That's number one. And stopping the support automatically applies genuine pressure. Secondly, ask for an implementation of democracy, full democracy with equal rights between the Jordan River to the sea. Wake up Israel from your arrogant and racist dream or fantasy or pseudo reality. And that's it. You're facing reality now. And that's it. Simple. There'll be a couple of kerfuffles here and there, of course. But by the way things are going, they know that it's inevitable. It's going to happen. They didn't show willingness to fight on behalf of Israel. If they haven't fought for Israel so far, when so many in the top Israeli figures are telling you it's an existential war fighting for our existence, then what makes us think that the United States will fight on their behalf, or anyone else for that matter, when they are collapsing? And by days, did Netanyahu tell the North people they will be back home by September? No, this is what happened. Netanyahu told the northern settlement leaders, 4 months ago, there was a meeting. I think it was in May, actually. And he was there, and Gantz as well. That was before Gantz resigned. Gantz was saying, we will have a hot summer so that you can hopefully return to your homes in September. Netanyahu reportedly said, well, what's the problem if we delay them returning to their homes or people returning to school by several months and not September? And Benny Gantz at the time was outraged. How can you do it? And the people in these settlements were outraged, like, well, why do you want to have an indefinite open war? We need to have some sort of normality. Our kids need to go back to school, and. So actually, he did not promise. Netanyahu did not promise that they will be done by September. He actually showed willingness to continue this open war. Okay, let's see if we have anything else before we wrap up. Okay. Cool. Yeah, we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. I hope I added some beneficial information for you in this live stream. Like I said, I had one video earlier on, but I think I've elaborated enough in this live stream for you. I'll hopefully be with you tomorrow for another video or live stream or both of them. Thank you so much for everyone who participated in the chat, and sorry if I missed some of them. We'll usually miss some in the live stream. Thank you so much for everyone who sent supers: Rebecca, Z, Studio, Daniela, Dr. X, Khadija, John, Chocolate, Matlas X, and Kirk. Thank you so much for your support. Stay blessed, everyone. Take care. And I will hopefully see you soon in the next live stream. Peace, everyone.